Excellent. So I did not make a separate slide to introduce myself, so I'll just do that before I go ahead and load this up and start. So hi, I am Runa Winters. I'm an indie visual novel dev. I am primarily a writer and programmer and project manager, although I do a little bit of music composition and sound design, all of which to say graphic design is my passion, but not my skill set. So this will be a great introduction to the capabilities of Godot, but not necessarily its shiny, delightful graphical capabilities. Don't read my other file things. Okay, now we will open up the presentation. Wouldn't you know, I didn't actually make a PowerPoint. I just decided that I would make a visual novel in Godot. And now I'm going to share with you the actual presentation screen because I decided that the best way to show off what visual novels in Godot are like is to just make a short little visual novel in Godot. So hold on, can I just share my entire screen? Or I guess I'll just keep on sharing over and over as these happen. But yeah, so yeah, this is I just made this in Godot. And now we're going to start the actual presentation. So let's make sure that this shifts over to the actual presentation. Here we go. Why we need Godot, proving that it's easy and fresh to try out a fresh new engine, and I'm not just trying to get a rise out of you. Of course, we click the begin presentation button, not to try to trick everybody with a fake PowerPoint button. Yes, so I know that some people pronounce it Godot instead of Godot. However, I choose to say Godot because that lets me make more puns. So anyway, let's learn about Godot. Godot is an open source 2D and 3D engine that has a lot of power, and GDScript is very close to the Python that most of us are familiar with from working in Renpy or other Python-based platforms. There's a lot of benefits to making visual novels in Godot. And to help us explore these benefits, let's welcome a cute little ghost who I've brought in just to Renpy. Renpy is one of those mispronunciations that I know it's wrong, but I'm somewhat endeared to it, even though I can't bring myself to say it properly. Anyway, Renpy and Godot have a lot of similarities. Anyway, I've brought on this cute little ghost who's a character from one of my games just to show you a little bit of the sprites that can work in here. And this is, again, going to show you that graphic design is not my skill set, but still, Evie here is going to tell us a little bit about Godot's features. And I'm going to try my best to do an Evie voice because I couldn't get I couldn't reliably get audio to share from my side. But hi, am I in the right place? I've never been in a Godot game before. Yes, Evie, you are in the right place. Oh, hello, I'm Evie. All right, so Runa asked me to tell you about why you should make visual novels in Godot. There's lots of reasons. Since Godot is a 3D and 2D engine, it's got a lot of power and can handle things like 3D rendered backgrounds, advanced 2D physics, particle effects, lighting, shadows, pretty powerful shaders, and a lot more. Godot also gives you a lot of flexibility to do things that might be harder or more time-consuming in other engines, especially given the significant growth of the Godot dev community over the past couple years. If you make visual novels in Renpy, Godot can give you a lot of new tools and techniques to experiment with. It's also pretty easy to pick up since the scripting languages are pretty similar. And if you make visual novels in Unity, Godot has a lot of similar features and also supports C# code. And also it doesn't have as many weird licensing issues or fees or anything like that. You can also adjust the UI and swap settings easily. Or like this, I might need to work on this one. Again, graphic design is my passion. That's right. Thank you, Evie. You're welcome. Did I do okay? Okay, everybody, chat. Did Evie do okay? Did Evie do okay? I've weighted the answers here. You can vote with 1, 2, 3, or 4. Yeah, I'm seeing some 1s, I'm seeing some 4s, I'm seeing some 3. Okay, left. Okay. I'm just gonna go with 1. Thanks, Evie. Now, if Godot is this great, shouldn't everyone use it? And the answer is, well, maybe. So let's take a look at the comparisons between what it takes to start a project up in Renpy versus in Godot. It's a little bit similar to the differences between starting up a project in Renpy versus in Unity. If you've had any experience working in both of those engines, you'll probably have a good sense of what the differences are in Godot. So in Renpy, you've got that solid foundation when you start up a new project. Like you can start it up and you've got a menu, you've got like the save and load system, you've got basic options. There's even accessibility built into every Renpy project, and it definitely use the accessibility in your Renpy projects. Accessibility features there are really great. Um, and systems that are kind of intimidating for people who are just starting out in visual novel dev are already set up there in Renpy, and that's a real load off of your shoulders. But sometimes additional features in Renpy will take a little bit more work or a little bit more time to incorporate. It can still pretty much do just about everything, though. In Godot, the situation's just about reversed. So basically, a new project will start from scratch. And now, similar to Unity, there's a lot of plugins and other things that help you really, like, earlier during one of our breaks, Stella was talking about how making things from absolute scratch in Unity is a thing you don't want to do, but you don't have to. And similarly in Godot, you don't have to make it entirely from scratch, but there are some things that you'll have to do on your own in Godot that Renpy already takes care of. You'll need to make some of the foundational systems. And the save load system, there are actually some alternatives there, but like, sometimes making a system in Godot means choosing a plugin that you're going to work with, or just putting more thought into how that is going to get incorporated into your game, because there's a lot more options. And then as the trade-off, you've got extreme flexibility and freedom, and it's very easy to do a lot of things like, real-time shadows and lighting, or animating 3D objects on the screen, or even like incorporating full 3D rendered environments into your visual novel, even if, you're only taking them from a fixed perspective. Those are pretty easy and out-of-the-box things in Godot that you can work with pretty well. You won't start entirely from zero, and so just like in Renpy and Unity, Godot has a sizable library of assets and plugins that I'm going to link that can help you get started, including the one that I use for the dialogue in this and all of my other Godot games, Dialogic. So this is generally one of the fun and helpful things that I found about working in Godot, is that Dialogic is pretty, it's pretty accessible to people who aren't good at coding, which I appreciate because I work with a lot of other people on my teams who either aren't familiar with GDScript or Python, or just feel a little bit intimidated about the process. And so it has this visual editor that people can go into and do a lot of the things that I normally do in code. I prefer the text editor, but it's nice to have this sort of option. And there are lots of other tools like this in Godot that can basically get you up to speed editing your visual novel pretty quickly. There's some visual editors in Unity as well that I know a lot of people used. I used a couple when I coded in Unity a while back. And it's very helpful to have the option to switch back and forth between them. The thing about Dialogic that I also like is that it can integrate with all other systems that you code yourself, or it can handle just about all the things on your own. So you can sort of pick and choose how many pieces of this connect to the code that you write. So for example, I write my own system for sprites and animations. This lets me do a lot of more complicated sprite animations with the assets that the art team creates. And it also means that I don't have to have a text box running or the Dialogic system running, so I can free up that memory for like animations and visuals to keep on going. It is still technically in alpha. They're constantly releasing updates. So I would say the only like caution going into Godot is that because it's been relatively recent, like the last like couple years, that there's really been an influx of people joining on like into Godot dev circles. there's constantly new assets and plugins and features being released, and that also means that sometimes some of them are still baking in the oven. But I've rarely had issues with Dialogic in its current form. Even like a year ago, there were like a lot of bugs that I had to like hammer down myself, and nowadays you can open it up and it's like pretty solid. Um, and so in both of the previous games that I worked on, Good Lord and Bridgewater Deepwood Access Radio, I used Dialogic to handle not only the dialogue, but also it ran all of the variable storage and, you know, like the routing and pathing for the actual game, while I stored all of the audio and other systems in systems that I coded myself. I'll try not to get too into programmer talk, but basically I made singletons for all the other systems that stood alone on themselves, and then I also have managers that handle the connections between them. Um, there's lots of other cool things that I don't have on hand to showcase, but you can easily find some really cool showcases on them that I'll link later, where you can take like you can do skeletal animation pretty easily in Godot. It really nicely supports uh basically what you think of skeletal animation is you take sort of like the paper doll approach to images that you're using in your game, and that opens up a lot of options. And then of course you can also render 3D objects or panoramic backgrounds. There are a lot of options for parallax. All of the things that Justin talked about in the morning talk about the 3D things in Renpy also work in Godot. So all of this is just our big overview of like Godot's features, and I'll have some examples later. But for right now, how do you get started learning Godot? Well, everybody does learn differently, and things are going to work differently for different people. But in general, there are three places where I learned the most of, like most all of my Godot skills. The first is online courses and tutorials. There's some free videos. There's Udemy and other websites like that that have some that I will link. You know, people giving out tutorials about like, here's how you make a puzzle platformer. Here's the like line by line of how I made Flappy Bird in Godot. Those sorts of things are really helpful, and especially if you've got experience in Renpy, it's extremely easy to pick up and be like, oh, I know exactly how this works, because again, GDScript is Python based, and so there's a lot of overlap there. The second is the boring answer. I learned by reading the documentation, which is actually the way that I learned that Godot supports BB code, which allows you to make like shaky text and wavy text and rainbow text. You can actually customize the style of the rainbow text to like be different frequencies and patterns and things. It gets intensive. And then the tried and true FAFO method, otherwise known as fuck around and find out. Trying to make a game in Godot was the best thing to teach me how to make a game in Godot. And so I went last January, I prototyped my first game in Godot, which was Jimmy Quest. It was a little stat builder about a small cat that was trying to bite her roommate cat's tail. And there are a couple different endings, and it's based on real true life events. And no one can prove otherwise. And that one worked nicely, but it was a little bit rough because, of course, that was my first game and a prototype in Godot. So then I did my NaNoWriMo in Godot. And then I did another game that people may have heard of. Why can I never remember the titles of the games that I work on? This one's got a longer title, though. It's Good Lord, Everyone at the Reunion for My Religious All-Girls School is a Trans Man, and They're Hot, for Otome Jam last year, and I coded that in Godot, and that one turned out really nicely. A lot of people assumed that it was in Renpy because it looks, you know, it's not that it looks like it's in Renpy, but it runs as smoothly as a Renpy game, and so everybody was like, oh, I didn't know Godot could make games like this. So I'd say that one's probably the easiest, best example of if you want to see what a game in Godot that's a visual novel that's got like a good level of polish might look like. And then Bridgewater Deepwood Access Radio, which I made for Yuri Jam. It's got a demo out, and that sort of can show you. I've got a little bit of of that game to show off, if we've got a little bit of time, to show you what sort of like visual aspects of Godot I really enjoy playing with, and also just some of the fun things that you can do with the way that the Godot environment is laid out. A lot of times, you know, when I'm thinking about whether I want to start my next project in Renpy or Godot, it's really down to like, okay, what's the organizational like layout I want for my workspace when I'm going in to make this game. So, in summary, Godot is a powerful and flexible and really approachable engine that you should try out. You should see how it feels, play around with it, and prototype something, because I think it's always better to know more engines than fewer engines. If you make visual novels in Unity, jumping into Godot was pretty easy, and you can use C# still if you really want to use C#. And most people will find that Godot is faster and can do most of what Unity does without a lot of Unity's issues and baggages. And the specific ones I'm talking about are both the things that happen with Unity's runtime licensing fees, but also when I open a project in Unity, I often open it and then I go and make myself a coffee and get a snack and walk around and do the dishes, because it takes about 15 minutes. And I think the longest it's ever taken me to open even the biggest Godot project file has been about like 2.5 minutes. And if you make visual novels in Renpy, it's extremely easy to pick up because they're both based on Python, and it'll take you a little bit more time than you're used to get the game up and running, but once it does, you'll have a lot of new options and features to explore and play around with. And now it's time for some examples. Let's see if I can't smoothly switch over to sharing my other screen. I don't actually, okay, I'm just gonna have to close that for Zoom to cooperate. But I'll show you really quickly, everyone, where Godot has gotten us in the Bridgewater Deepwood Radio Access team. If it'll let me. Oh, I don't think Zoom's going to let me share another window. I think I've shared too many windows.
It usually lets you. You can pick different windows and tabs.
Yeah, it's, for some reason, it's decided that it just won't let the window, that window is just not available for selection. That's okay. I will.
By using a different frame buffer, and it can't get to it.
Ah, that makes sense. But at the very least, I'll show you what the actual code for Godot looks like so that we can look at the engine. And this is also a great time if we want to open up to any questions while I see if I can't get this opened as well. Oh, there we go. Yes. Yes. So this is the general Godot environment. It looks a lot different than Renpy. You have a lot of things that are node based. And so, for example, we start the main menu as its own node, and the different pieces of it in the UI are organized in a hierarchy like this. So it's pretty easy to organize these things. And you can do a lot of fun UI things pretty quickly. It's very good for prototyping in the same way that Unity is very good for fast prototypes of different ideas. And then I've separated, like, all of the visuals in the game are on a separate node that runs. And the sprite has like a sprite base that all of the sprites run off of. This is a little bit programming talk, but let me see if it'll let me, run the game from here and share with everybody. There we go. All right. Yeah, so this is a great sort of example of all the different parts that go into a thing in Godot. So you can probably think of different ways that you might make this sort of opening in Renpy. But the way that we did it in Godot is, so there are layers of PNGs, as everything is layers of PNGs when you get down to it, but also there are shaders that we've got that I prepared for these radio waves, and then there's a nice shader on a helpful and descriptive website called godotshaders.com. And that has this faux sort of audio waveform effect down here. And then I've got these sliders all coordinated to do different things as you go over each one of these buttons. And there's also a nice CRT filter that comes along with Godot on that nice handy website, godotshaders.com, that you can use in a lot of different ways. A lot of people have been making great shaders and other similar content. And Godot is, one of those engines that I think is in the process of becoming like really, really big and well supported. And we're getting a lot more features and everything all the time. So definitely worth checking out. So, there we go. All right. Now will it let me share my regular? I don't think it's going to let me share my regular one. Zoom's not cooperating there, but that is my general overview. I think I might have gone faster than I expected as well, but I am always open for questions if anybody has questions about Godot. I am also, so one of the things that I have been doing is creating a template project, which is basically just like, here is a blank Godot project that has all of the different things that I've set up as like my own sort of basic systems that I know I'll always use for making a visual novel. And that sort of thing is something that I built out for myself, but I also want to build that out and get better documentation written into the code so that I can share that with everybody else so that it's easier for everyone to try out Godot if they want to. So that is my general overview on how Godot works and how you can make visual novels in it. And I am happy to show off any of the like projects that I've got on hand right now, or if anybody wants to see how I did any of the things in the presentation was actually pretty simple. I decided to set like a limit on myself, like, okay, you can make this silly fake PowerPoint presentation in Godot, but you can only spend like 2 hours on it. So all of that was within like a pretty short span of time that I threw all that together.
Cool. That was
Yep.
awesome. And a lot of people
Thank
are
you.
excited. A lot. I was like, one
Yep.
more engine to learn. Yay.
Yeah, it's honestly, I my first visual novel engine was Renpy, and then I went and tried some things in Unity because there were some things, and this was like back in like 2018. So like at that time there were some things that people were always saying, oh well, that you need to use Unity if you're going to try and do that. And I tried, and it took a lot for me to learn Unity from the ground up there. And by contrast, learning Godot from learning Renpy has been like a breeze.
Cool. All right. I'm gonna let you guys like chat out because this is a topic with no bottom to it. So go handle it in the chat. That way we can make room for Tom to have his talk. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you.
Window. And... Okay, are you able to see what I'm seeing?
Yep. I see your slides and just your slides. All your